Outstanding, the ultimate accolade for teachers. We challenge secondary teacher Louise Radford to go from good to outstanding. A top inspector will observe one lesson. 2 experts will fine-tune her practice and beef up her presentation. She then gets 2 weeks to take on the advice before the inspector comes back for the final verdict.
Trying to do all these things with your teaching, but then trying to move yourself a step forward is an incredibly tiring, difficult thing to do.
Kingsbury High School is a massive comprehensive in northwest London. Louise Radford is an English teacher in her 2nd year at Kingsbury.
Since my teaching career started, I've wanted to know how to be the best possible teacher I can, because I think it's a crime to go into the classroom and not do the best of your ability every single day.
Her English department rates her teaching as good.
I'm really looking forward to that process of finding out the kind of teacher I am, what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, what I can do to improve, and going through a really vigorous process of improvement. Everyone look at the interactive whiteboard.
Louise will focus this challenge on her Year 9s.
I think Miss Radford could improve by getting the whole class involved and making sure that everyone gets involved instead of the usual people putting up their hands.
I want you to do it in your books.
Sometimes she just makes us work on our own, but she is a good, really good teacher.
In just 2 days' time, she'll be under the gaze of our eagle-eyed inspector, but there's still time to catch up with her college friend Claire.
So what sort of thing are you going to be teaching?
Well, we've just started the GCSE syllabus, so we're going to do poems from different cultures, and I thought I'd do half cast.
Standing on one leg.
Yes, that's right, yeah. So I'll be there standing on one leg.
I know Louise from Homerton College. She's very calm in difficult situations, and I'm sure she'll do fantastically well. I'm sure she's excellent already.
I've never been observed by an Ofsted inspector or by an HMI inspector, and I'm quite excited in a weird way to get the sort of luxury of being observed by one of these inspectors, to get a really honest appraisal and a breakdown of my teaching. So I'm incredibly nervous about the whole thing, but I'm also quite excited because I think it's quite a unique experience, quite a unique opportunity.
It's the morning of her observation. Just time for some reassurance from Head of Department Rachel Kitley.
I've really tightened up my lesson plan, and I've made sure that I know the timings of everything, and everything's really tight, and I'm going to move it through everything at a good pace. So I just have to get in there now and do it and see how it goes, I think.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
I hope so.
Be nervous.
Okay.
With hundreds of inspections under her belt, School Inspector Claire Gillies leads inspection teams up and down the country. She certainly knows an outstanding lesson when she sees one.
This is Louise teaching Year 9 English, and I'm obviously hoping to see a good lesson and maybe some outstanding elements as well.
Louise has 55 minutes to impress the inspector.
Right. We've got 2 aims for today's lesson. Aim 1 is to understand how Agard, that's the poet we're going to be looking at today, uses language to create the tone of his poem. And also, aim 2, to produce a PEE paragraph, a point evidence...
An accepted understanding of outstanding compared to good is that all pupils in a class have made at least the amount of progress you would expect in a lesson.
Right, I've got 4 lines which come from the poem. Now, what I need you to do is decide how you are going to say those 4 lines. You might say the line really loudly. You might say the line really quietly. You might say the line in a really sarcastic way. Just read through the lines and decide how you're going to say them.
The key elements that I'm looking for in a lesson: are the children absorbed? Are they all keen to do their best? Do you get the feeling they want to join in, that they like learning about that subject or topic?
Rachel and Paul, and mix a black key with a white key in a half-cast symphony.
Humorously.
Why humorously?
Because it's they're trying to make a joke out of it, saying that humorous is the joke.
So a humorous use of language you felt, which is why you'd say the line in that way. Lovely. These lines come from the poem Half-Caste. So it is time now for us to have a look at the poem. Excuse me, standing on one leg. I'm half-caste. Could anyone just tell me what they think the theme of this poem is? Nicola.
He's trying to explain that by someone saying half-caste, they're not actually half something.
Thank you, Nicola. That's a really lovely answer. That using the term half-caste suggests that you're half a person, and he's almost mocking that idea and taking that idea to be that you can't be half a person. Of course you can't be. Now, you're going to have a go at writing your own PEE paragraph. Now, this is what's going to happen. I've got your question up here. There is also an extension task. I'm going to work with the group in the middle, and I am going to be expecting the rest of you to get on with your paragraphs in silence. So if you could all highlight what you think the effect of the language is for me. What you think the effect is. That's right, Danny. You can have elements of outstanding in your lessons. You can do things that are considered to be outstanding. But your lesson will only ever be good because you're not using those tasks in the right way. The lesson isn't flowing in the right way, and maybe those tasks aren't quite linking back to the aims and the objectives of the lesson. What I want you guys to do now is spend 2 minutes reading through your own paragraphs and see what target you could give yourself.
I think the best bit about the lesson was when she was saying her poem. I found that quite enjoyable.
All targets written. Put your pens down for me.
The lesson was like a bit tricky because I didn't know half the stuff that we were going to cover today. So by the end of the lesson I learnt it, but it was really confusing at the beginning.
So how did Louise get on?
Louise, thank you very much indeed. I really enjoyed that lesson.
Okay.
Now let me highlight all the things that I think you've got such skills as a teacher. You virtually didn't have to worry about behaviour management at all, did you? And you clearly planned your lesson extremely well in terms of differentiation, that wonderful word. And as for your sort of presentation skills, I mean, there's definitely an actress inside you. The way you read the lines of the poem was just inspirational. And certainly as a whole, the lesson was good and it was effective and they learnt a lot. What I felt didn't just take it onto that really higher plane. The beginning of the lesson was, I think you just said, right, come along, we've got these aims on the board, but there was no why are we going to hear about this poem. And I found certainly 2 over here who were a bit hazy about what half-caste means in everyday life. And that sort of underpins so much of what you were trying to get across. And to just have 4 little sentences like we had, and read them out and discuss them before we really had got them into context and sort of thinking behind that.
Building on the idea of tone, and so I didn't necessarily want to give them the poem as a whole and have that whole text for them to deal with. I wanted it sort of broken down into chunks for them.
I understand exactly, but weighing up how much emphasis to give to the sort of moral content of the lesson as opposed to the sheer, this is an English lesson, we are going to practice writing, that's where the balance becomes, I think, very difficult for you. Some of them gave some really interesting answers. You've obviously got the idea of sort of wait for them to give the answer, don't rush it, but there certainly could have been some more extension. You were keen to get on, so clearly you sometimes extended their answers rather than trying to get them too. I mean, you've got so many teaching strengths. And I'm being, in a sense, super critical of really what were they going to take out of the lesson, what had they learnt, what were they going to be thinking about. Maybe the wholeness wasn't going to sort of go out of the room. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
She can definitely go from good to outstanding because she's already got many elements that make her a good teacher. It's going to be a question of balancing the English that she's teaching with the implications of such a deep poem.
It's finished. It's finished. Yeah! Woo!
How did it go? You waiting?
No, I'm pleased with how it went, and I'm glad it's over.
You're tired?
I'm really tired. I was up at 6. So I think this afternoon I'll have to go home early and have a bit of a nap.
The first observation is now behind her. The inspector highlighted Louise's need to sharpen up her lesson structure and achieve a balance between context and language skills. Now it's time to bring on the experts. To boost Louise's progress, help comes from communications coach Roger Terry and advanced skills teacher Emma Potts. They start by watching Louise's lesson.
This is the beginning of the lesson. That's what she felt at that moment.
Yeah. You can see that they've got a good rapport with her.
And I'm going to do this exercise.
Although she's got quite a loud voice, her resonance isn't commanding enough.
We've got 2 aims.
She did include a plenary. She didn't, however, go back to the objectives.
Now this is what's going to happen.
And change the way she uses her gestures so she's not spending a lot of time clasping her hands together, but how she creates a really good learning environment.
I've seen your lesson, and there were some brilliant parts of it. Now, one of the main things that I really think will make your lessons outstanding is the use of assessment for learning. The main characteristics of it are that we share learning objectives with the pupils.
Yes, I call them aims, but I suppose perhaps I should call them objectives. Maybe my objectives could have been clearer.
Right.
And maybe I could have used outcomes so that they knew what was going to be expected of them in the lesson.
Yeah, and it's like a tick criteria for them. What have they learned in that lesson? How can they prove it?
Yeah.
We look at just a lesson where I managed to get outstanding. Amazing. So the objectives that I gave them, that I displayed on the interactive whiteboard, but also on a board at the side, so they're there constantly throughout the lesson. So it might be blowing them up on A3 paper. Now, I was thinking, in terms of outcomes, how am I going to know that they've understood what those objectives are? So they had 3 cards, and they all had to hold up. They had the cards each. And they had to hold up which card met which objective. But I do think they were then very clear about what they were learning and how they could actually meet that.
Because then they know that what they're doing and how it meets the objectives of themselves in their own minds. I don't even necessarily have to say anything.
And again, throughout the lesson plan, every single section's got sharing objectives and outcomes, sharing objectives and outcomes. It just refocuses the lesson at all times. You might even do mini plenaries, you know, small activities within those.
It then really focuses the students back to exactly what they're doing. It stops it from getting woolly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One of my problems at the beginning of this has been my planning and making sure my aims and my outcomes are clear and focused, and all my tasks are building to my aims and my outcomes. And she's shown me some really excellent ways of how I can build in different tasks and make my pupils incredibly aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it.
One of the things I'd like to do is to get you to play with where you position your voice, because what's really, really useful in the classroom is if you can drop your voice onto any particular person.
Okay.
And there's a way of teaching you to do this. Now, this is kind of a voice catcher.
Right.
So all you need to do is to imagine that you're putting your voice into that cup. If we do this right, what I'll feel is a vibration in the cup because it's a nice thin cup. Now tell Johnny in here.
Johnny, turn round.
Excellent.
Johnny, turn round.
Excellent.
Johnny, turn round.
Okay, now I can feel a vibration on that when you do that, so that's good targeting. Tell Johnny to turn around once more.
Okay. Johnny, this is the last warning. Turn round.
Very good.
Now this is what's going to happen.
You tend to have your gestures here, and they all fit into this box here. So what I want you to do is that we're going to start off with, I want you to get your gestures a little bit bigger. In fact, it'd be really good. You know, when you're creating a picture for people, you really want your hands right up here.
Yeah.
How does that?
Weird.
Even higher up than that.
Don't like it.
You don't like it?
Don't like that at all.
Feels strange.
You might want to describe the mountains and the snow. I feel like a bit crazy waving my hands around like that way.
Okay. There's another place where you can use gestures.
Right.
And especially if you want people to put things in order. The first thing we're going to do is this, the second thing we're doing this. And it's really good to have your gestures aligned with the things that you want to do. The sequencing gestures all happen around here.
Okay.
This gesture with open palms, now, that's a great gesture when we're trying to pull everybody together. Now, when we're teaching normally, what we don't really want to do is have our hands like that. This is called placator. So what we can do is we can turn them over and just, okay guys, you'll find that this movement will give you a particular voice note.
It's much more kind of, this is what's going to happen, rather than
this is
potentially you might do your homework for me, depending on what kind of mood you're in. Please, I need you to do this for me. He's really shown me some excellent ways of really making my presence felt in the classroom and using my voice in a much more effective way. And I'm really looking forward to going back and trying out all those different things. Right, now we're going to look at today's objectives. And they are to
So, with Louise's final observation just weeks away, it's back to the classroom to put all that advice into action and raise her game.
From the clinic, the things I've tried today that I feel worked well was revisiting the aims and objectives. So you're doing 2 things here, guys. In fact, 3 things. And I tried to do some mini plenaries. So before I begin reading this poem, I just need to check that we understand the definition. I think there's still a little way to go with the assessment for learning. So, just a couple of questions. I was trying really hard with my hand gestures and I was finding it really difficult not to do this. And counting out the different tasks, and I tried holding my hands out to get them to be quiet. Thank you. And I felt that actually the way they were responding and how I felt when I was doing it was that it was a lot clearer and I was getting my ideas across a lot better than standing there like this. Right, sorry boys. Focus and listen to me or else you're not going to get to go to lunch on time. In this box, I've just got this out just recently. It's all my summer shoes that I hid away because I had nowhere to put them. And I'll be leafing through these, deciding which ones need chucking out. Like these flip-flops probably need chucking out. I wore them on holiday to Egypt. I try to keep a good work-life balance, so I try to do most of my work at school. Obviously, because there is so much to do, often I'll end up doing a little bit of marking at home, but I want to do my job in the best possible way that I can, and I think especially with teaching it's important that you do that because you are teaching students and what you teach them has value and importance to them. Our aim for today's lesson is that we will be able... I've tried really hard with my aims and objectives over the last couple of weeks to make them really clear. Did anyone tell me what they think the outcome... Like today, I tried to get the students to think about what their outcome could be. That Dirish.
To finish our essays.
But I still think there's quite a long way for me to go. Obviously, we are wanting to attain a certain level with the paragraphs that we are writing. And one of the big things about my teaching is me being aware of, has every single student in this classroom learnt something? What I want you to do is write down one way in which you are going to improve the writing. I found it quite difficult to tell today how much they'd been moved on, which obviously is an element of an outstanding lesson, being able to tell that. I'm also really experiencing how difficult it is to be going from good to outstanding because, you know, Emma can give me 100 different tips and Roger can say, don't put your hands, clasp your hands together and all that kind of thing. It's all perfectly valid. And you think, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, that's really easy. But actually doing it and remembering to do it and weaving it into your lessons and also doing it effectively is a completely different matter. Hello?
Hi, is that Louise?
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
With Judgment Day looming, Louise gets some last-minute advice from Emma.
And from the ideas that we talked about, have you thought of any ways that you can kind of show the progression?
Well, what I'm thinking about doing on Mondays, because we're working on annotating,
right?
And they haven't really developed any annotation skills. As part of my plenary, I was going to get them all to write 3 top tips for what they'd give to another student.
Yeah, definitely. But what I would do with something like that at the beginning of the lesson is ask them, okay, you know, what are annotation skills? What that really then shows is that by the end of the lesson, when you then say, write their top tips, it's shown how much they've learnt in that actual lesson.
That's a really good idea. I'm going to try that on Monday, I think.
It's just quick, you know, there's not much preparation involved.
Great. Well, thanks again for your help. And I'll speak to you soon.
All right then. Okay, take care.
Bye. I'm currently planning for my second observation, taking all the stuff that Claire Gilly said to me, all the stuff that Emma Potts said to me, and seeing if I can tick the boxes and make sure I've included as much as I possibly can. The aims are much clearer, the outcomes are there, which they weren't before. How the students are going to reach those aims is there now. The mini plenary ideas there in place so the students can really see what they're learning and why they've been doing what they're doing. Hopefully what should be clear at the end of the lesson is that learning has taken place.
The day of Louise's last observation has arrived.
It's very bizarre, but I don't feel like there's as much pressure on me this time. I don't think I'm going to be outstanding today at all, but actually that doesn't bother me because I know that my teaching's improved.
Claire Gillies is back, and it's crunch time. With all that expert advice and weeks of practice behind her, will Louise have made it from good to outstanding?
Right, the objectives we have for today's lesson are to explore language techniques in a poem, develop your understanding of how a writer conveys a message to the reader, and to understand how to annotate a poem. Here I've got for you some of the tasks we might be doing, well, that we will be doing today, that are going to be helping us to meet those objectives that we've got up there on the board. All of you should have a sheet in front of you. I'm going to give you 5 different situations, and you have to decide in those 5 different situations, what would you do? If you saw someone you didn't like being bullied, what would you do? Would you ignore it? Would you tell a teacher? Would you tell the bully to stop? We're going to come back to that task later on in the lesson.
The vast majority of outstanding lessons will have been very carefully planned, and the resources will be right for what that lesson or topic is covering.
They picked a canny up one morning, beat him soft like clay, and stuffed him down the belly of a waiting jeep. What business of mine is it, so long they don't take the yam from my savouring mouth? Right, we're going to stop and think now, and we're going to recap. Could I have some people offer me what their ideas were on the poem so far, Dylan?
It's sort of like, I think it was about people seeing something that was wrong, but not having the guts to stand up and do something about it, and then in the end it happens to them, sort of like karma.
Good, so that idea of karma, very nice, thank you for that. Which aim have we been working towards at the moment? We've got the aims up here on the board.
Develop your understanding of the second one.
How a writer conveys a message to the reader. Yes?
I think Miss Radford is a good teacher, and recently I think she has begun to get better because she's individually asking people about what they think and how they understand the work that's been given.
We are now going to move on to looking at developing our annotation skills. Now, I just want you to tell me, could anyone just put their hands up and tell me what annotation skills they think they might already have?
Sometimes you can number the paragraphs.
Today, I'd like you to tell me if you think you're not confident in annotating or you think you might need some help. Can you go and sit over there for me, please? So, we've got this quote here. They picked a canny up one morning, beat him soft like clay. So, first of all, what language technique is that? It's a simile.
I actually understood quite a lot because sometimes I don't actually get stuff. Today I actually got help like from the guided group. Smith just took us and actually just sat down and just actually explained to us what actually everything meant.
What I put up on the whiteboard before was that when you annotate, you underline words, you highlight words you do not understand, and you number paragraphs. Put your hands up now if you can think of other stuff that you might do when you are annotating. Yes?
Annotate different types of words like we've learnt today, similes, personification.
Thank you. Now, what I want you to do is write down 3 top tips that you would give someone if they were going to be annotating a poem.
At the end of a lesson, obviously you're going to step back and reflect on how much have these pupils learnt in that particular lesson that's been observed.
Right, we're going to look at the exercise from earlier, but I want you to think about, is there any situation or scenario down there that you've now changed your mind about? Did you change your mind, Danny?
I changed my mind because of, even if you didn't like the person, it's still wrong for them to get bullied.
So those of you today who changed your mind have seen directly how literature can affect you and how that poem has affected you and affected your opinion. You've all worked really well today, well done. Okay, you can pack away now.
I just think the lesson went really well, and eventually everyone understood the aims, and the majority of the class did get involved.
Louise, thank you very much for letting me observe that same group again. And there were many outstanding features which made for a very successful lesson. And how did you feel it
it went.
I feel it went much better than last time, and I feel that my aims and my objectives were much clearer. It just seemed to flow together a bit better this time as well.
Yes, I think the whole beautiful structure that we had, it was so clear where we were going, and yet there were surprises for them. I think that was what was lovely, was the blending of very clear objectives, but equally doing the sort of bullying tick boxes, and we had the real joy of hearing the poem. So we were really appreciating the richness of that poem without having pulled it to pieces at all before, which is, if you remember what we did last time. So we sort of approached things in a more logical order, but actually which probably nurtured the emotions of it all. I thought one of the most successful things from their point of view, perhaps as well as yours, was suggesting that they chose who was going to come and have a bit of guided support. I mean, this is the great, where you can really feel, I got to that point. Everybody quickly wrote down 3 tips for analysing a poem. And then that lovely sort of bringing it back to human, the reflection on bullying and changing your mind. So I felt that there was a lot of learning going on in that session. I really felt that was an outstanding lesson, and they're lucky pupils to be taught by you, and I'm sure they appreciate it.
Thank you.
Her teaching is very good because I've learnt more this year than I have in the last 2 years, and it's helped me a lot with my sets.
Feeling really, really relieved. I can't believe it's over. It's been such a roller coaster this past month, up and down, and I've been nervous and I've been excited, and it's been really hard work, and actually a lot harder than I thought it would be. And sometimes I've thought to myself, my goodness, what have I got myself into here? This is really difficult and I don't know if I can do it. So I'm really glad that I've persevered and I've kept going, and I know that my teaching's improved, and so that's why I was doing this, and so I'm really pleased that I've met my ultimate objective, which was to improve my teaching.